let's return to the fascinating world of Nickelodeon. I have my fair history with this network, and I even played a couple licensed games on my channel a while back. SpongeBob Super Sponge being okay-ish, nothing spectacular, but far from the worst game I've ever played. That honor goes to Royal Ransom, a game I would rather put behind me for good and never look back. Despite these less than stellar games, the Nicktoons themselves were a blast. Everybody's well familiar with SpongeBob, and Rugrats will always have a special place in my heart. But of all these Nicktoons, there is one other that stands out from the crowd, and this one I'd consider my personal favorite. Let's talk about Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. I loved this show back in the day, and having rewatched it as of late, I still enjoy it as much now as I did then. In fact, I'd probably say I love it a lot more now looking back on it. This weird CGI show about a kid with a knack for invention, with a superpowered mind, a mechanical canine, forgive the paraphrasing. Anyway, this scientific whiz and his gang of misfit friends, Carl and Sheen, set out on these wild adventures, be it taking on space aliens or dealing with one of Jimmy's inventions gone horribly wrong. It was a working formula for the creators, and with it came an incredible amount of success in its heyday for being so unique among other Nicktoons of its era. It launched with a feature-length film, then with it came the TV show. It ran for 3 seasons, spawning a handful of TV specials, a crossover trilogy, and a spin-off that we're best off not talking about and leaving it at that. Being one of Nick's greatest hits, of course it would step its foot into the pool of licensed tie-in games during its lifespan, and the results were rather finicky to say the least. I swear the quality of these games were all over the place. But what we're talking about today is the one I have the biggest connection to. Enter Attack of the Twonkies, released for the PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube. There's also a Game Boy Advance port, but we're going to be focusing solely on the console counterpart. Of all the Jimmy Neutron games, this was the last one to be made, released in 2004 and based on the TV special of the same name. To give you all a quick rundown, Jimmy brings home an exotic space creature while on a trip to a far-off comet. Eventually it multiplies and everybody gets one of their own, and on the surface they're just the cutest thing ever, until they hear music. Then they turn into ferocious beasts on a rampage to destroy the source of the sound. The only way to combat this is Sheen's singing voice, which is apparently so awful that it puts him to sleep. It's a real fun watch, with the simple premise of taking on space aliens while serving as a pretty funny homage to Gremlins. Of all the TV specials, this one is hands down my favorite, and to hear there's a video game based on this special sounded really cool. But how well does it actually hold up? That's what I'm here to discuss today. Let's dive right into Jimmy Neutron, Attack of the Twonkies. Published by THQ and developed by THQ Australia, Attack of the Twonkies is a rather interesting experience as a game. For starters, the story beats are followed as closely as they possibly could. As soon as the game starts, we follow the exact plot to a T. Jimmy presents a demonstration of the comet, Principal Willoughby comes in to discuss the new library, there's mention of the punk band Grey Star, and from there Jimmy heads off to Twonkus 3. The efforts to make the cutscenes almost one-to-one with the special it's based on is pretty admirable. There's some tweaking in the script here and there, but the fact that this is all in-game is respectable in its own right when it could have easily made full motion video captures from the episode itself. Having said that, the game looks presentable enough. With the series being set in 3D, I'd imagine it was easy bringing Jimmy Neutron into the world of video games. Of course, you can tell they had to tone down the quality of the models to get him running in-game, but they're still pretty easy to look at, for the most part anyway. Though for whatever reason, they modeled Cindy after the movie rather than the TV show, which really confuses me. I wouldn't feel the need to bring this up, except in the same game, Libby's model more so resembles how she was updated later in the series, so I don't know what went wrong here. Maybe they thought it was easier to work with what they already have rather than starting from scratch. I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. Either way, having seen what came before this game, it's still a major step up, and I'm all for it. Same goes for the fact that the voice acting is greatly on par with the actual show itself. I always enjoy hearing the original cast give it their best in these licensed games, and this is no exception.
Don't run! Don't run! Get out of my way! And don't panic!
So nice to hear you too, Rob. And of all the games I've seen, this one has the strongest resemblance of Retroville, if not the closest. We have standard set pieces like Jimmy's lab, Limburg Elementary, there's a candy bar, the inside of Jimmy's house. Just seeing all these familiar set pieces done so right feels like you're actually there. I really love that attention to detail. While the plot closely resembles what we see in the TV show, by the time Jimmy brings back the Twonkies from the comet, that's where things start to shift in the game's story. Though the general final plot beats are still intact. Music irritates the Twonkies, it's up to Jimmy to gather them all, and the one thing to calm them down is Sheen's voice. Only real difference is that instead of putting them to sleep, it reverts them all back to size. And wouldn't you know it, it actually serves as a game mechanic. Which brings me to the actual gameplay. As Jimmy Neutron, your objective is to explore the town of Retroville, retrieving Twonkies and collecting all sorts of objects to create a variety of inventions. Despite appearing to have platforming elements, the game really sets itself up as more of an open world collectathon, the objective being to clear out all the required collectibles before you move on to the next stage. Throughout the game there are different types of gadgets to build. Gizmos are the easiest tools to make, requiring 2 objects. Standard inventions require 3 pieces, and super inventions require 4. You'll find all sorts of items scattered throughout the game, and with the right equipment, you can make all sorts of crazy inventions, with only a handful of them serving an actual purpose to the game. In fact, a lot of the tools you're making are entirely optional and are only there if you really want to see something cool, like leaving a rainbow trail behind, giving Jimmy a crazy hairdo, or running really fast to the tune of Benny Hill-esque music. That last one I probably use the most, just to help speed things along. Of all these gadgets, the 2 you're gonna get the most mileage of is what you'll be using to take care of the Twonkies. Twonkies in this game have 3 phases. You have the standard QT form, the Stompers once they hear music, and Grumps serving as the 3rd monster type and is exclusive to this game specifically. If you come across a Stomper or a Grump, you use the Sheenograph to revert them back to Twonkies. Once they're small enough, you use the VDR to rake them in as if you're playing Luigi's Mansion, which this game really feels like once they teach you what to do. Just replace Luigi with Jimmy Neutron and all the ghosts with Twonkies. It's the same core principle. They even have a ranking system based on how well you do in the stage. Doing well enough will gain you trophies as well as bonus content if that sort of thing tickles your fancy. There are also commands for Goddard when the game demands it, though like certain inventions, you hardly make much use of this outside of key sections. They introduce it early in the game. There's a whole level dedicated to calling on Goddard in Twonkus 3, then it's quickly dropped right afterwards. Sure, you might need him to search out some Twonkies and have him play dead to enter this music store, but that's about as far as it goes. I can't say I expected a whole lot, what with this game being surprisingly short in about 3 to 4 hours time, but it's kind of a shame Goddard is somewhat underutilized about halfway through the game. The super inventions, all of which require 4 pieces as a reminder, are only ever useful in boss fights. Now that we're here, I genuinely don't know how to feel about this game's bosses, and I'm not gonna count the crater boss where all you literally do is walk up to the rocket and that's it, stage cleared. At best, they're rather confusing, like the playground boss, where the idea is to use the super invention right as it's about to strike lightning, or the roller coaster boss where you're supposed to phase the monster with moonbeam particles. This one especially took me a while to figure out. And at worst, there's the frozen lake boss, where you're fighting against both the ice physics and the monster's attacks all at once. And once you deal enough damage, it's especially tricky trying to avoid turning into a solid ice block, and can get really annoying most of the time. And the kicker is that the final boss of the game is a huge culmination of all these bosses put together. So once you know what super invention to use at that moment, you should be fine. Not the best bosses I've played, but far from the worst. Assuming you've been ranking high in the game, which is not that hard to do in hindsight, the bonus content mentioned earlier consists of a look at the game's concept art, getting to play all the mini-games introduced in Retroland. Small side note, these mini-games are actually solid, all of them being a blatant homage to retro games you find at your local arcade. Things like Asteroid, Frogger, or Space Invaders for example. It's all really cool to play. And lastly, there's a bonus level where it's pretty much a 3-man race against Carl and Sheen on jetpacks. If you can get through all these rings and still win, good luck. Anywho, with the Twonkies all rounded up and the monsters all taken care of, Retroville is safe and sound once again thanks to our lovable boy genius. Well, except for one thing. Yep, just like the TV special, they left behind this one Twonkie to wander the city streets, setting up that cliffhanger ending. And as far as the series itself is concerned, this won't be the last we'll see of the Twonkies, oh god no. Throughout season 3, they really seem to love hiding these things in almost every episode near the show's end, and honestly, it was a lot more fun coming back to this season alone just to see how many of them I can find. But that's Attack of the Twonkies. Of all the Jimmy Neutron games out in the market, I've always heard this was the best one, and having actually played played it, I definitely see it. It's nothing groundbreaking, and once they introduce its main objective, it kinda drags in one or two places, but as an overall game, it holds up alright. It's straightforward, right to the point, and more importantly, it gets the job done without completely overstaying its welcome. I don't know if I'll ever dive into the other games surrounding the franchise, but for the time being, I'm content in saying this is where Jimmy Neutron peaked in the gaming scene. Do give it a shot if you can. I think you'll probably enjoy it. Or not, whatever floats your boat, I guess. In any case, thank you all so much for watching. This is Miss Dan signing out, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.